I'm going to move now to Niamh Dowler, Coordinator, Laois Offaly Children and Young People Services. Earlier this year, Laois Offaly CYPSC was awarded funding under the What Works Sharing Knowledge Fund for the Consent, Education and Healthy Relationships project, working with Tullamore Rape Crisis Centre. And obviously this comes at a moment where I think it's fair to say there's a lot of initiatives, a lot of projects here and abroad to really now get to grips with consent and moving beyond just teaching no means no, but getting more into what consent looks like, feels and sounds like, that we're really getting into the nuances and really thinking about the sexual literacy and confidence for young people and adults in all of this. But Niamh, what I wanted to ask you was, in the context of all of that and this important conversation we've all started to have around consent and how you teach consent, can you talk a little bit about the process? I know there's like 8 C's that you have been working on, but maybe just to kind of set the context of this project. Why this project? Why now?
Sure, Anya. Just firstly, I suppose, as you said, this project just kicked off this summer, so we've been meeting ever since we got the What Works funding. In July and then August, everybody was trying to frantically meet because, you know, it is a short time span initially for us, but obviously we've big plans. So just to say, I represent a working group of 7 partners in true collaboration style. And these are people from Tusla Midlands, from Offaly Domestic Violence Support Service, Laois Domestic Abuse Service, Tullamore Rape Crisis that you've mentioned, the Sexual Assault Treatment Unit in Midlands Mullingar, the Sexual Health Clinic in Portlaoise, and the Garda DPSU unit in Laois Offaly. So that's our collaborative group of partners, and it's just, obviously just want to acknowledge them that I just represent them today, that I'm just one cog in the wheel, as I would like to call it. So I suppose this particular project, the context for it lies back in, it was actually one of the Gardaí that met with me back a long time ago, and other service user or services were saying as well that they were seeing a huge amount of intergenerational unhealthy relationships coming back through their services, and obviously, as you've mentioned, all the stats for other services in DSGVB increasing over the last few years. So there was a real local identified need in terms of, we need to get to these young people, we need to support them, and all this work has been done in an empowerment and supportive capacity for the young people and their families. So obviously the context is very important for us to look at the policy context, and obviously if we looked at Minister McEntee's zero tolerance policy, I think that came out there in June, that was quite a good baseline for us to work off and to be supported by in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. And then in the schools context, it's the Department of Education SPHE curriculum, the RISE Pact that's related to relationships and sexuality. So that was kind of the policy, or what was out there. There's lots more. I mean, there's incredible amount of resources in this area. But I suppose what we're trying to do is something very niche. And I know Kevin mentioned around pathways. We're also trying to signpost to local services through this particular project. And then also in the context, we also needed to look at the practice. So what was out there, what was good practice? So obviously we followed the incredible work that was done with the Manuela programme, which is now the Consent Ed programme under DSGVB in Tusla. So that was kind of the context piece for us, Anya. And then very quickly we had to move on to where was their commitment.
And so building on that, right, so you have your context, your landscape, commitment seems to be there. You've mentioned the Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, so there's definitely will. You then start to kind of look at more questions of, I guess, capacity, the challenge, and you have your champions, so we all need allies in order to kind of make sure this is prioritised. But can you talk a little bit, as you worked through all of that, then to the challenges that the project had to confront as part of getting this up and running?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the challenges also came through, I suppose, the whole capacity of who was available. I mean, it's all very well saying, yes, we will engage and we will be a partner on this project, but we must remember that all the people we were looking towards are frontline, extremely busy people with increasing workloads. So I guess one good sign for me at the early stages was that when we were putting together the application form, and everybody listening in today will know what we all do in that frantic space of trying to get application forms in, but I was ringing around people, I was sending them the draft, they were coming back with good stats, good data, so I knew there was a huge appetite for us to drive this on. So certainly then in terms of the challenges, because of the project that we looked at, consent and healthy relationships, we had different perspectives. Even though we all wanted the same thing and we all know what the law is, there would be slightly different perspectives in terms of approach to topics. So we spent a lot of really, really interesting meetings working through all of this, and even a very practical thing in terms of a challenge when we were designing these 5 workshops, what workshop would go first and which workshop would go last, to the point that the one that we thought that was going to be last at the first meeting is now first after a series of maybe 4 or 5 meetings. But that's through, I suppose, gelling through the group and working things through and getting a sense of what's in each different workshop. So that was really good. I'm glad to tell you, Anya, that on this occasion, money was not a challenge. On this occasion, because I suppose everybody's coming from, Eileen is nodding here beside me, and I'm sure there's lots of people on the call or on the call today nodding, but I have to say the What Works Sharing Knowledge Fund has just been, it does exactly what it says on the tin, and when I sit there in the meetings, I just go, yeah, this is it, sharing knowledge, because the level of expertise across the partners that I've mentioned and the willingness to share and for us to upskill us all before we ever put ourselves out in that public platform to the schools is just incredible.
It's great. I'm curious to learn, as you say, you can have all of these stakeholders and everybody, you know, there's that mantra that everybody should have strong opinions but loosely held, so that you can come out of the room and, you know, somebody has to make a decision, you have to rank, you have to prioritise that these are the workshops in this order that we're going to do. How did you bring all of that then knowledge to the point where it did get to collaboration, but critically then coordination, that there is something now that is working? So I'm curious in just that flow and just any early insights as to what is working given the extent of this great coordination.
Sure. I suppose the continuity piece and spending the time listening to each other and working through our consistency of messaging and why we needed it to be so consistent given the sensitivity of the topic. So, and then we had some people who delivered in schools already, so that was a little bit, they'd kind of go back and redo some of their material to fit into the wider 5-part workshops for the schools. I guess the collaboration was really important, that we looked out to Galway Rape Crisis Centre, who have huge experience, and we used our local partner, Tullamore Rape Crisis Centre, to kind of make sure that happened. So the collaboration then was to bring in that external resource to work with us, but we had to have our groundwork done and we had to have gelled, and we had to, it would have been fruitless had we brought Galway Rape Crisis Centre in any sooner, but we were so glad of their experience. So in terms of someone to collaborate with. And then we also, in terms of practicalities around dealing with disclosures, because everyone has different policies. So we were delighted to link up with our Midlands TUSLA Children's First Information and Advice person, and they were able to work with that piece on us. So I think this is a thing, there's so many incredible people out there all across this sector, and it's just kind of tapping into each other and trying to find the time. But yeah, money does help sometimes.
Great.